Hello and a very warm welcome to the Daily News Simplified session of the Raus IAS dated 5th of April 2024. Today in this session, we are going to take up important news and articles from three leading newspapers, that is the Hindu, the Indian Express and the Business Line. On your screen, you have the topics listed out, but before starting with our discussion, there is a small request that if you like our initiative, then please do like, subscribe and share our channel. Thank you. Now to start with the first topic is regarding the completion of the International Year of Millets, and in this context an article appears in the paper Business Line on page 8 where it is said that the curtains come down on the International Year of Millets, and this topic becomes important from the perspective of GS paper 3, that is agriculture in India, because in 2018, if you see in the mains PYQ, the 2018 was the National Year of Millets. And subsequently, what UPSC did was it asked a question emphasizing on the millet production and consumption in India. So, on similar lines, what can happen is that with the completion of International Year in 2024 mains, you can have a similar question, or on the similar lines, another question on the millet cultivation or millet production in India. So, in this context, let's start with our discussion. So, firstly, you can see the millet map of India, that is how millet is being cultivated in terms of the regional diversity. So majority of the cultivation, if you see, it is taking place in terms of three varieties of millet, that is pearl millet, which is also called as bajra. Then you have sorghum, which is also called as jawar, and then you have the finger millet, which is called as ragi, which you together called bajra, jawar and ragi. And if you see its spread of millet cultivation, then it's mainly concentrated in the regions of, say, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, in all these regions. Okay, so with this introduction of the map of distribution of millet cultivation, now we'll look into the aspects of what is the significance of millet cultivation, why we have not been able to utilize it, and what can be the way forward in this regard. Now, let's start with our discussion of the significance. So millets, as you all know, it is a form of, say, some small seeded grasses, okay, which are quite nutrient rich. And in the context of India and some other regions such as Sub-Sahara and other such underdeveloped regions, it is said that, especially by the report of the FAO, that is Food and Agricultural Organization, if you see, it is said that significance of millets in these regions is quite high. And it is on account of several factors, which is economic, health, climatic, social, and in terms of crop diversification. So the first factor is regarding the economic aspect of the significance. So economic aspect of the significance is that firstly, it is less input intensive. Now, if you see the report of Dalwai panel, which was the panel on recommending about the ways how to double the income of farmers. So it has suggested reforms at three levels, that is at the input level, at the level of production or productivity, and at the level of market. Now in this regard, if you see the conventional crops such as rice or wheat, they are highly input intensive in terms of the fertilizer, in terms of the water requirement, in terms of the electricity requirement, the amount of seeds per hectare that you require, that is quite high. And in that regard, what happens is that the cost of input at that level is quite high. But when it comes to millets, this is quite normal, or you can say comparatively lower in comparison to the rice and wheat. So that is why it is less input intensive, because it does not require much of fertilizer, it does not require much of water in terms of irrigation capacity. So for that regard, what happens is that the cost of input for the farmers, it declines. Similarly, if you see the millets, they are not just limited to their usage in the as food material, but they can also be like as food, or say some feed or fodder material, or say some in industrial use in, say, some biscuit factory. It can be used in making some kind of alcoholic drinks. It is used in the industry. So this is a multi-purpose crop. So this is why it generates an economic benefit in multiple sectors. And similarly, in terms of rain-fed areas, if you see, the millets majorly are cultivated in those areas which are rain-fed. And if you see the condition of rain-fed areas currently, then the yield is 3 times lower in these areas. And the level of poverty among the farmers in this area is also quite high. So if you promote a more efficient and a more reformed version of millet cultivation in these rain-fed areas, so what will happen is that there will be an economic resurgence in this rain-fed areas, and that will help in what? Some sort of poverty elevation in these areas. So this will be what? The economic benefit of this millet cultivation. Then we have the health benefit. The health benefit in terms of, it is said that millets conventionally are more nutritious. That is why the government in 2018 changed the nomenclature of millets as nutri-cereals. As nutri-cereals. And in this regard, it is said that being more rich in protein, vitamin, minerals and other dietary fibers, it has a higher health benefit. Similarly, if you see the glycemic index of the millets, it is quite low. That is, glycemic index basically means that what is the rise in the sugar level of your body with the consumption of a particular food item. And when it comes to the consumption of millet, it is quite low. That is, your sugar level will not rise in terms of the consumption of millets, and that is why it is also gluten free, and that is why it is recommended for people who are diagnosed with diabetes, or say who have a problem of high blood pressure. So for those people, it is highly recommended. And in this regard, the third benefit we have is regarding the diet diversity. Diet diversity in the sense that today, if you see the average composition of a vegetarian thali in India today is regarding the majority composition of rice and wheat, which is not very nutritious. So when you include, like Government of India has done, as it has included millets under the PDS, so when you include the millet consumption in the vegetarian thali, or say some in any other thali, what will happen is that it will generate a form of dietary diversity, and that will in turn generate a form of health benefit. So this is the health sector of benefit of the millet. Then we have the climatic benefits. The climatic benefits in the sense that millets are said to be more abiotic and biotic stress tolerant. Now, biotic stress tolerance means, say, some pest or disease attack. So they are more resistant to that. In terms of abiotic, you can have the situation of drought in those areas. So it is more resistant to those conditions conventionally. And also presently, if you see the agriculture sector in India, as per the report of government, it is contributing to around 14% of GHG emissions. Now, when you start going for millet production in those areas, what will happen is that the millet plants or the millet crops have a quality of carbon sequestration. That is, it will absorb the carbon in its in its cultivation areas. So what will happen is that the GHG emission intensity of the agriculture as such will come down. Also, if you see in climatic benefits, it has lower water consumption, that is around 2.5 times lower water consumption. So what will happen is that presently, like in Punjab, there is a case study that if the same rice and wheat cultivation goes on for the next 25 years with the same level of water consumption, then what will happen is that the Punjab is on the verge of being transformed into some sort of desertification area. So in this regard, what can happen is that in those areas of water crisis, or where the aftermath of green revolution is being felt, what can happen is that millet cultivation can be promoted, which will in turn generate what? Climatic benefits, as it is less water intensive, it is less input intensive in all those matters. And lastly, if you see, as per the economic survey of 2017-18, The economic survey has highlighted that on account of the climatic factors, on account of the climate change, what will happen is that the income of the farmers in irrigated areas, that is in irrigated areas and in unirrigated areas, it will go down by how much? By 15 to 18% here and by around 20 to 25% here. So to prevent this impact of climate change, what can be done is that we can promote more climate friendly crops such as millets in those areas. Similarly, you have the social benefits, and for this you have two case studies that have also been highlighted by UNDP and FAO. Now, first is the Kodo Kutki model, which was implemented in Madhya Pradesh. Now, in Madhya Pradesh, in the district of Dindori, what happened was that government what it did was it constituted in a public private partnership model, it constituted a federation of village groups, that is around 1600 people are there in a village, especially it was women centric. So a group was formed in equal numbers, say 40 groups of equal number of people, and they together constituted a federation, and the benefits that were being given such as training purpose, such as in terms of what is the best way of planting a crop, what is the best way of harvesting, what is the best way of processing, storing, and then again value addition to that crop. The training was being provided by whom? The government, in terms of the groups that were constituted. Similarly, after the production, where will you sell? So what happened was that here the private sector pitched in as wholesale buyers, and they were not just buyers, they also gave credit facility to these women farmers, where micro loans were provided to these women farmers. So what was happening is that on one account, due to the government efforts, the production was increased, and for the consumption of this production, what was being done is that private sector was chipping in as wholesale buyers. So this was the Kodo Kutki model, and what it did was that it helped in the increase in the average income of women farmers in that area. So this was the success model in MP. Similarly, the success model of Odisha Millet Mission, where what it did was that, especially since Odisha, you know that it is characterized by a high percentage of population of tribal people, and in this regard, this initiative was mostly Dalit women centric, and that is why we are studying this initiative under the social significance of millet cultivation. So Dalit women centric. Now what happened in this was that similarly again the training aspect of the women farmers was guaranteed by the government initiative, in the sense that more number of extension services was provided, more number of information, the weather forecasting and all those, like the information regarding the soil conditions, every form of extension service help was provided to the women farmers. The production was generated, and here what happened was that for the consumption of that production, the government did was it included that millet in the category of free rations that was given under public distribution system. Also it included millets under the midday meal program, so that production got consumed in this category of PDS and midday meal. So a form of, you can say, locally sustainable model of millet production was generated. So all this, if you see the social impact, what happens was that it generates what? Food security. It generates what? Income security. So food and income security is being generated by the social impact of production of millets. For example, poverty elevation can be done, as you must have seen in the previous DNS about the inclusive growth potential of agriculture. So when you promote millet production, what will happen is that socially you can promote the upliftment of people who are still under the poverty line. So this is the social impact of that millet production. And lastly, we have the impact of crop diversification. Crop diversification, because millets are basically short duration crops, and being a short duration crop, what can be done is that it can be incorporated as a rotational crops. with the conventional ones such as the wheat or paddy. And in this regard, by incorporating it as a rotational crop, the condition of the soil can be improved. Why? Because the entire year, for the entire, okay, I will write here, for the entire year, the soil will remain covered. So what will happen is that the nutritional quality of the soil, the overall carbon retention capacity of the soil, the organic carbon that is present in the soil, that will improve on account of what? The crop rotation using the millet cultivation. So these are the benefits that will accrue on account of promotion of millet. Now let us see as to why we have not been able to do it in terms of the challenges that exist in terms of millet production. So firstly, if you see, the issue is of seed quality. Now the issue of seed quality is in the context that you can see this graph. For example, this orange line suggests the area under cultivation, area under millet cultivation, and this green line, if you see, this suggests the yield. So yield, if you see, it has been increasing over a period of time. But on similar lines, if you see the area, this line has been going down. That is the area under the millet cultivation, and this is India centric. So the area under the millet cultivation has been declining, although the yield has been increasing. So what is happening is that since the area, the conventional, the traditional areas under the cultivation of millet is declining, so the overall seed variety, because the more number of varieties of millet cultivation takes place, the more number of seed varieties we have. But since that production is declining, so the varieties of seed and their quality is also declining. And on top of that, when we have you say gene bank, which is being run by International Crop Research Institute for the Semi-Arid Tropic Regions. This is the overall acronym of that institution, that is International Crop Research Institute for Semi-Arid Tropic Regions. This has a gene bank regarding the millets, the best quality of millets. But this gene bank is not getting adequate support in terms of the global funding that is being provided to other like the conservation of other different conventional crops such as rice, wheat and others. So in this regard, the issue is at the level of seed quality. Secondly, as at the level of farm, if you see, then if you see the success of green revolution in India and some other nations such as Latin American nations, then the green revolution success was possible because of the large amount of public investment that went at the farm level. That is in terms of, say, the quality of inputs that were provided, that is the high yield variety seeds, the kind of farm machinery that was provided, the kind of irrigation infrastructure that was provided, the kind of market infrastructure that was created. All these investment by the public, that is by the government at the farm level, they helped in the success of green revolution. But when you compare these parameters in terms of investment in the millet sector, it is quite less. It is less to the sense that it does not generate enough security among the farmers to go for the millet cultivation. So this is one issue. This is a major issue in this sector. And secondly, if you see in the millet cultivation, the harvesting and processing activities currently, they are mostly hand driven. That is mainly, manual type of things. So in this regard, this becomes a quite tedious task. And that is why farmers do not feel so much of incentivization so as to shift to the cultivation of millet. So this is the challenge at the on-farm level. Then you have the issue at the level of processing and storage. At the level of processing and storage, if you see, there are two types, that is traditional or say hand milling, and then you have mechanical milling. Now in traditional milling, the retention of nutrient content is high, but it is quite slow. So that is why you cannot do it at a larger scale. And similarly, if you look at the mechanical milling, what happens is that although the process is fast, but the overall nutrient content gets diluted. So there is a confusion regarding which method should be scaled up to what level. because it is just not the industrial level of production that we are talking about. It is also about the small scale farmers who are totally dependent on such cultivation, because majority of the farming of millets in India, it is done by the small and marginal farmers. Similarly, there are large number of species of millets, like you saw in that map, Bajra, Jawar, Ragi being the major, and then you have Kodo and other foxtail varieties of millets. And for all these varieties, you cannot have a similar type of milling method, and in that regard what happens is that it creates a necessity for developing different types of milling method. So this is the second one. And lastly, if you see, there is issue of shelf life. That is, for many of the millets the shelf life is quite low, and so what happens is that as soon as it is produced, it should be processed fastly and sold in the market as soon as possible. So that also generates a issue at the level of processing and storage, because we all know that the storage capacity in agriculture sector presently is quite less in India. Okay, and lastly, at the level of market and consumer, if you see that the lifestyle changes in the society, that is shift towards more processed foods, more fast foods, that is the junk foods we tell. So what happens is that there is a lack of awareness among the people about the benefits that the millet consumption can have in terms of health, like we saw, such as lower glycemic index, in terms of better consumption item for, say, people who are diagnosed with diabetes, and also people are not aware about these benefits. Why? Because of the lifestyle changes, and in this regard this creates less demand for millets and in turn less production. Similarly, because of the varieties of millets that are being produced, there is also difficulty in categorization at the retail level, that is at the level of seller, as to which products should be categorized as millets, which products should not be, because there is a distinction between major millets, minor millets, whereas some do not consider something as minor millets but put it in the category of something else. So there is a confusion at that stage. Also, even if you want to consume, the cooking process or overall handling of that cooking process is not easy using the millets. For example, when we go for the cooking of or making of bajre ki roti, it's such a tedious task that we take time to ask someone to make it for us. But when you go for the consumption of, say, wheat like roti, chapati, or say some maida version of it, then you do not feel that difficulty in cooking it. So that is why there is a level of difficulty involved in cooking that product involving the millets. So this is the issue and the challenges in the millets production. Now let's see as to what can be done so as to improve the millet production. But before that, let's see what steps the government has taken, because government has recognized the challenges, and in that regard it has subsequently enacted various schemes and programs. For example, under the National Food Security Mission, it is being promoted as a nutri-cereal. The MSP on bajra, jawar and ragi have been increased by the government subsequently. Also, there is a scheme regarding nutritional security through intensive millet promotion. That is how you can achieve nutritional security, by promoting millet consumption. Also, you had the celebration of National Year of Millets in 2018 and International Year of Millets in 2023. Similarly, there is a production linked incentive scheme regarding the food products, that is processed food products, and under this government is giving incentive for manufacturing of millet based food product. Similarly, since 2007 we have the National Millet Mission that is being run by government for the promotion of production and consumption of millets. Also, some other initiatives like nomenclature of Shri Anna for millets, that is, it denotes what? It means mother of grains. So this is what? This is the steps that the government has yet taken or is presently taking. Now what can be done on top of all these steps? Let's see that. Now, firstly, what can be done is that we can promote more amount of public investment in the millet cultivation, in the millet production. For example, as we saw the example of green revolution, like for example, more irrigation, or say, although the water requirement is less, but micro irrigation at that level in an efficient manner can be promoted. Similarly, better marketing infrastructure can be created so that the production does not get wasted at the level of farm. Similarly, there can be like better machines can be provided to farmers so that the handwork or the manual work that is still prevalent in that production can be minimized. Also, secondly, you can promote better research and development in the sector of millet. That is not just about high yield variety seeds, how it can be generated, but also about research and development on the market. That is how more demand can be created in the market regarding the consumption of millets. More like better market intelligence can be promoted through research and development, because research and development is just not about that laboratory experiments and scientific paradigm. It is also about creating a ecosystem, a market ecosystem in the favor of millets. Similarly, you need to promote better cultivating ecosystem. For example, when you start providing crop insurance in millets, when you start providing better MSP, which is still being provided, but what is happening is that majority of the procurement under MSP is for the rice and wheat. So although you are giving higher prices, but that procurement is not taking place. So that is of no use. So what should happen is that more procurement under MSP should take place for the millets. Similarly, better and more targeted form of loans can be provided to the farmers for shifting to millet cultivation. So a more favorable ecosystem can be created for cultivation of millets. At the level of global trade, if you see, presently just around 1% of the overall millet produced is being traded, just 1%. So what can be done is that overall at the global level, a form of alliance can be developed, a form of organization or institution can be set up through which the trade in the millets can be promoted. The trade in the millets can be promoted, especially in the context of India, where there is a lot of potential to export the millets. Then you have the genetic conservation, that is presently, as you saw, that International Crop Research Institute has been maintaining a gene bank, but it is not in a very robust state. So what can be done is that more varieties of millet seeds can be researched upon, their gene bank can be created, and more funding can be put in the maintaining the robustness of that gene bank. That is the genetic conservation. Similarly, lastly, you have is promotion in consumption, that is generating what interest at the level of public so that a demand is created. That is, you talk about folk to farm strategy, that is cultivation based on the market demand. And this can be done what? Through, say for example, at the school level we can generate more awareness among the children for consuming of millets. At the college level and through various advertisement we can generate more public sentiments in the favor of consumption of millet. So this is the promotion in consumption, and through all this method we can do what? Promote higher production of millet, higher productivity of millets, and higher income to the farmers, and subsequently the benefits will also go to the public in terms of better health benefits, better climate sustainability of the agriculture, and all those things. Thank you. This is all for this topic. Now let's move to the next topic. The next topic is basically in the context of the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita, that is the latest code that has been enacted to replace the IPC 1860 that was there. So we have 3 new criminal law reforms, that is Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita and 2 others. So in this context, this article appears in the Hindu on the page 8, where a former IPS officer has highlighted certain issues in that Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita as to how it can be constitutionally invalid on certain grounds. So in this regard, this topic becomes important from the perspective of GS paper 2, that is Indian polity. Now let's see what basically Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita has brought about in terms of certain new dimensions, and then we will see what are the aspects or challenges that have been highlighted by the author in this article. Now if you see now this image that you are seeing, this particular thing, this is from our polity compass, which you can also refer for other topics. So this, if you see the first one is regarding sedition. That is, sedition has been removed as an offense, because as you must have heard in the Vinod Dua case, there was a case involving Vinod Dua. So in that case, what the Supreme Court had done was that it had put a stay regarding the operationalization of sedition provision, which was existing under section 124A of the IPC 1860. Now, taking lesson from that Supreme Court judgment, what the government has done is that it has removed sedition as such under the new Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. Secondly, terrorism has been included as in terms of its definitional aspect, that is, it has been defined and also as a separate category of offense. Thirdly, organized crime has also been included as a distinct category. And here is one challenge that the author highlights that we'll see subsequently. Fourthly, there was a lot of debate regarding mob lynching as to should mob lynching be made a separate offense, and often, like in Supreme Court various judgments, has said that mob lynching should be made a separate offense. And taking lesson from that, what the government again has done is that it has enacted a separate provision to deal with the cases of mob lynching. Then you have a very good provision regarding the community service. Like in ancient India also, see, if you see, there was a system of Vargild. Now under the system of Vargild, what used to happen is that, okay, I will write this word here. That is, if you committed any offense, you had to pay a proportionate amount of compensation. And in that era, what used to happen was that you had to donate those number of cows that were proportionate to compensate for your offense. So this, similarly, a community service has been introduced as a punishment for certain offenses, such as if you are committing a crime of theft of below 5,000 rupees and all such cases. And in terms of the women and child-centric provision, the various provisions that were existingly fragmented in terms of their existence, they have been consolidated under a separate chapter, under a dedicated category, and some very enabling and empowering provisions have been enacted, such as the marital rape in case of having a minor wife has been made an offense. Similarly, if you go for sexual intercourse through deceitful means, that has also been criminalized, and various other aspects. And then you have the Supreme Court judgments regarding homosexuality and adultery. So Supreme Court had decriminalized both, and going by that line, the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita also decriminalizes both the aspects, that is homosexuality and adultery. Then attempted suicide, this has been decriminalized, but community service has been added as a punishment for that. And then you have certain provisions such as regarding the hit and run provisions, because on account of which there was a major protest few months back by the truck driver association and all those people. And then there has been more introduction of more stricter punishment for animal cruelty. Sorry, it's not visible. I will write here, animal cruelty. So these are some basic changes that have been made. Now let us see what are the dimensions or issues that have been highlighted by the author in this code. Now the first section is the section 106 clause 2, which basically deals with the hit and run cases. Now let's see in the Bare Act what it says, that the summary, this is the 106 clause 2, that is the summary of this article is that if you by mistake or by your negligence happen to meet an accident with causing a fatal accident leading to the death of that person to whom you have hit with your vehicle, then what will happen? Then what is the provision in that case is that you have to inform the police officer or a magistrate. And if you fail to do so, then what will happen is that you can be sentenced to an imprisonment of up to 10 years along with a fine. Now, if you see this provision, it says that when you do a crime, say hit and run, like a accident, car accident or bike accident, whatever be that, when you commit that crime, what you have to do, you have to go to the police officer or a magistrate and say that you have committed a particular thing. Now, when you see this provision in the light of Article 20 clause 3, then Article 20 clause 3 says what? It says that no person can be compelled to give evidence against oneself. That is, there cannot be any self-incrimination. But by going by that this provision, it says that you yourself, after committing that crime, whatever that be, by use of bike, car or truck, whatever be, you have to go and inform the police officer or the magistrate. So you are doing what? You are self-incriminating yourself in that regard. So this is a violative of this fundamental right. Similarly, in the case of, I will write here, similarly in the case of Nandini Satyapati, the Supreme Court said that when you go and like say accept your crime on the grounds that you will get a more lenient punishment, like in this regard, that if you do not go and inform to a police officer or to a magistrate, then you are liable to get a 10 years of imprisonment. So you will do the part of information, or that is of informing the police officer, for the reason that you do not get the 10 years of imprisonment. So if that is the case, Supreme Court in Nandini Satyapati case has said that any act done of accepting the crime for the reason that you will get less amount of punishment, that will be held unconstitutional. That will be held unconstitutional. So this provision can be held unconstitutional on this ground. That is the Supreme Court judgment in Nandini Satyapati case. Similarly, the second provision is regarding the section 112. Now, if you see the section 112 here, now this is regarding the organized crime. Like you saw, the organized crime has been added as a separate category. So when you are a member of a group or gang and you commit crimes such as theft, snatching, cheating, or any such of crime in an organized form, then what will happen is that there is a provision added of any other similar act. After mentioning all these crimes, that is snatching, gambling, cheating, it has added a provision of any other similar act. That is, it is quite open-ended. For example, when you write this section, when you write this provision of any other similar act, then you get the discretion that you can go for the punishment of a person in terms of any act that you define which is similar to that act, although it may not be. So it becomes what? A executive discretion. So that creates an issue, as in you see in Shreya Singhal case in 2015, in the section 66A of the IT Act, there was a term regarding a grossly offensive. That is, you cannot post anything on social media or whatever be that platform, any post that is grossly offensive. But Supreme Court struck down this provision on the ground that this is vague, open-ended, and it is open to various interpretation. So on similar lines, when you say that any other criminal act, the same can be held unconstitutional on the ground that it is quite vague and open-ended. So this is the issue. Then you have the issue with section 303 clause 2. Now section 303 clause 2 deals with the issue of theft. That is, when you commit a theft, then you are liable for certain amount of punishment. But when that amount of, say, theft is less than 5,000, then what will happen is that you will go for what? Community service as a form of punishment. So this is a non-cognizable offense that has been made. So although by making non-cognizable offense you reduce the workload of police as such, because immediately you do not have to go for the arrest or writing of FIR, but what is happening is that you have fixed amount of 5,000. Now the value of this 5,000 depends on the person. For example, for a person earning say 1 lakh per month, for him maybe a 5,000 will not be that amount of loss. But for say daily wage laborer, if his 5,000 rupees has been stolen, then that will be highly impactful on that person in terms of his daily life activities. So there is a subjective biasness in deciding up to what amount there will be community service and after what amount there will be punishment. So this is the issue. Also, if you see, there are multiple property offenses in India, but the value of that property has not been determined in many cases. So what will happen is that in case of any crime that is done in that regard in terms of property offense, the police officer cannot take immediate action because it is a non-cognizable offense. So he has to go for a warrant of permission from the court and then has to take action, writing FIR and all those. So that creates an issue there. So this is the issue at the level of section 303 clause 2. Then lastly, the author highlights section 143 clause 6 and clause 7. The section 143 clause 6 and clause 7, basically you can see here, it deals with human trafficking. It deals with human trafficking, and basically it says that when a crime of human trafficking is committed on more than one occasion, that is a repeated offender, or it has been committed by whom? A public servant or a police officer, then what will happen is that there is a fixed punishment. There is a fixed punishment, that is imprisonment for the remainder of the life, that is life imprisonment. But when you look at the judgment of Supreme Court in Mithu Singh versus State of Punjab, the Supreme Court said that a law can be unconstitutional on the ground that the judiciary does not have the discretion to decide the punishment. So in this context, if you see, it says that in case of a repeated offender in the crime of human trafficking or a human trafficking crime by a police officer or public servant, the punishment is fixed, that is life imprisonment. So judiciary does not have the discretion. So for example, if the judiciary thinks that life imprisonment is not suitable in this case based on the mitigating and aggravating circumstances, so if they want to punish the person for say 7 years or say 10 years, so that cannot be done. Why? Because the punishment is fixed. And so on this ground, based on the judgment in Mithu Singh versus State of Punjab, this clause can be held as unconstitutional. So this is the basic essence of this article, that is certain issues that are there in the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. Now let's move to the next article. Now the next article is regarding India's performance in the Global Democracy Index. Now this news appears in the page 10 of the Hindu, and this becomes important from the perspective of GS paper 2, where you have a topic of comparison of Indian constitution with other constitutions, also from the perspective of democracy in India since elections are nearing. So in that context also it becomes important. And by going by the PYQ in the prelims, you see there was a direct question on rule of law index. So you can have a direct question on these democratic indices. So this article basically tells that the ranking of India on various global democratic indices has been declining, such as India has been categorized as a flawed democracy, as an electoral autocracy, as a partly free country. And in this regard, what the Indian government has said that it will bring its own version of democracy index. And in that regard, the author talks about why India is worried about these indices, what will happen if India comes out with its own set of indices, and what is the issue as such with the existing democratic indices. So in this regard, let us discuss about this index. So this democracy report, it is released by VDEM. Now VDEM is basically a short term for a project, that is Varieties of Democracy Project. Varieties of Democracy Project, which releases the democracy report, and it has 5 sub-indices. 5 sub-indices. Now these 5 sub-indices, the first one is the electoral democracy. That is, to what extent free and fair elections are taking place to what extent people are participating in the elections, to what extent media is free and fair during the time of elections. So on that parameter, you compute this sub-index indices. Then you have liberal democracy. Liberal democracy means to what extent there is rule of law in society. What is the level of civil liberty that is enjoyed by the people? What is the level of freedom of speech and expression in the society? So in this regard, this is calculated in terms of the civil liberties and the rule of law parameters. Thirdly, you have participatory democracy. That is to what extent the people are participating. For example, participation can be through the civil society groups. Say you have formed some NGO, say you have formed some pressure group in that regard. Then there can be some local government institutions, such as in India you have panchayats under 73rd amendment, you have urban local bodies under 74th amendment. So that's the participatory character of democracy. Then you have deliberative democracy. That is, the decisions that are taken in democracy, they should be based on deliberation and not just on aggregation. Say for example, if you want to take decision of public that whether a particular law should be implemented, for example say UCC, and if you go by the conduct of the survey and just 50% says that yes, this should be implemented, then that is not the right way. Because what will happen is that say some group that is just 5% or say some 10%, the opinion of those groups will get neglected. So you will have an aggregated opinion but not a deliberated opinion. So for a healthy democracy, we need a more deliberated opinion and decisions. Then you have egalitarian democracy. Egalitarian democracy in the sense that there are multiple sources in society, that is political, social, economic, cultural. To what extent there is equality in access to those resources. That is whether different groups in society are having access to those resources. For example, when you compare the accessibility of say SC/STs in the judiciary, that is quite less. So that brings down the performance of India in these parameters, that such as the egalitarian democracy. Now let us see what this democracy report has highlighted as such. Now if you see, the major concern of this report is that the overall democratic trend has been declining. That the level of democracy currently has gone down to the 1986 level. That is the progress that was made in the last 35 years, it has withdrawn. That is, it has been wiped out. And the major impact of this withdrawal of democracy has taken place where in Asia Pacific region, where this level has gone down to the level of 1978 as such. And in this regard, to quantify this decline, the report says that 72% of the world's population currently is living in some form of autocracies. 72% people, and just 13% people are living in liberal democracies. 72% in autocracies and 13% in liberal democracies. And when it comes to the context of India, India is among the worst autocratizers in the last 10 years. And for that regard, the government has said that this indices are highly subjective. Now let us see certain graphs and pictorial representation of this data. That is, if you see this autocracy and democracy, so this blue color highlights democracy such as electoral and liberal, and this brown and light brown color highlights the autocracy. So this region of India and all, they are characterized as electoral autocracy, and Russia, it is characterized as a closed autocracy. That is, there is no multi-party election as such. Although in India you have the multi-party election, but there is a lack of freedom of speech and expression. And countries of Europe, especially the Scandinavian countries, they are liberal democracies like USA and Australia. So this is the categorization that you can see, and that this is the process, that is democratization as you move towards this scale, and then there is autocratization as you move towards this scale. And if you see in this graph, then the share of world population that are living in autocracies, as we discussed earlier, it is 72%, but just a decade ago this was 46%. Similarly, in terms of share of population living in autocratizing countries, that is those countries that are moving towards autocratization, this has increased from just 5% a decade ago to 43%. So that is a major increase. Then if you see number of countries autocratizing, it has increased to 42 presently, and number of countries democratizing, it has decreased to 14. So there is a general trend towards autocratization. So now let's see what is the issue with this democracy rankings. Now if you see the methodology, there is a subjectivity bias, in the sense that the data that are collected, they are collected in various forms, such as, there is representative form of data. That is, you have a representative sample of people from whom you collect the data. Then there are expert level data. That is, you select certain experts from whom you seek opinions about the condition of democracy, for example in India, and based on that you formulate your ranking. Then you have the data based on in-house coding, that is, from the newspaper or some articles or some academic writings you collect the data. And then you have certain objective data, for example, what is the level of voter turnout. So when you compare this representative, expert choice and all, there is a lot of subjectivity involved as to which experts are you selecting, what is the sample size of yours, what kind of people, what group of people have included in your sample. So that creates a subjectivity bias in the ranking. Similarly, you have the phenomena of democratic panopticon. Now panopticon is basically a circular cell, and this word evolved there, and from this circular cell there was a constant gaze at the prisoners. So presently in terms of democracy, if you see, there is a form of western gaze at the eastern world, especially countries like India. That is, they should adhere to what? The western notions of democracy. And this generates the issue of democratic fundamentalism. That is, you are not liberal enough to accept that there can be different models of democracy. For example, Indian democracy has its own characteristic, and American democracy has its own characteristic, and there cannot be one uniform set of democracy. And when you do not recognize that, you are being democratically fundamentalist. And lastly, there is ideological discrepancy, in the sense that the ranking of Lesotho has been mentioned, whereby it is said that this country witnessed military coup in 2014, but it has been given a higher score than India. A country like India, which has never witnessed any kind of civil war, any kind of military coup as such. So that shows the ideological discrepancy in this indices. So this is all for this topic. Now let's move to the next topic. But before that, there's an MCQ also on this topic, so as to make you remember multiple democratic indices that we have. For example, consider the following statements and the pairs of report and the publishing organization. The Freedom in the World report released by Freedom House, Democracy Index released by Economic Intelligence Unit, Worldwide Governance Indicators released by World Bank, and Democracy Report released by VDEM Institute. So all these options are correct. So all the four. So you can remember this index. Now the next topic is regarding the 3D map of universe. Now this article appears on the page 8 of the Indian Express, which says that for the first time a holistic three-dimensional map of the universe has been generated, and this has been generated using an instrument called as DESI, that is Dark Energy Spectroscopic Instrument. We will see further, and this topic becomes important from the section of GS paper 3, that is Science and Technology, as in 2019 you had a question on gravitational waves, that is the answer was B, regarding an event about the merger of black hole. So on similar lines you can have a question on this 3D map of universe. Now let's see the elements of discussion of this topic. Now this is the 3D map that has been released by the organization, and let's see about the important elements of this topic. Now when you see the origin of universe as such, the origin goes back to the string theory. That is, the string theory talked about what basically triggered Big Bang. Now after the trigger of Big Bang, when the Big Bang happened, the initial rate of expansion of universe was quite high. That is it was expanding at a very high rate, and for that reason what happened was that no form of galaxy or stars formation could take place. So for some period we had a dark age, and for that we also have a dark age theory. Now, after the dark age, after the slowing down of this expansion, we started having the formation of stars, galaxies, planets, and all those things. And what this experiment basically seeks to do is that it seeks to go back to this original period of origination of light so as to trace why the universe is expanding as such. Because when you have the galaxies and the stars, there are spaces between these galaxies and stars, and they are constantly expanding. That is the expansion rate of universe, which is also called as the Hubble constant. Now this is constantly expanding. Now what the scientists are confused is that they do not have a conclusive evidence as to what is making the universe expand. And that is why this element that is making the universe expand has been called as dark energy, which constitutes around 72% of the universe, which is repulsive in nature. Why repulsive? Because it is making the area expand. And to counter this, we have dark matter, because when the expansion is taking place, we need certain force to maintain the integrity of galaxies, and for that matter we have a attractive force on account of the dark matter. So dark word for the reason that we are still not sure about what it exactly is, and this constitutes around 23% of the overall universe. Now what this experiment basically seeks to do is that there is an instrument, that is spectroscopic instrument, which is mounted on a May-all 4-meter telescope situated in United States, and what it does is that it captures light from the galaxies, say around light from around 5,000 galaxies at the same time. And using this light, what it basically seeks to do is that it seeks to know the distance between the galaxies, because by knowing the distance between the galaxy, what we can do is that you can measure the rate of expansion, and by measuring the rate of expansion you can deduce about this unknown factor, that is the dark energy as such. So the entire research is regarding the finding about conclusive evidence about the dark energy, because dark energy is something that has led to the expansion of universe since its origin. And what will be the fate of universe, that will be also maybe decided by the dark energy. So it becomes quite crucial that we go into deeper insights of this element, that is the dark energy. So this project, collecting the light and then splitting that light so as to know better about the expansion rate of universe, and in that regard the 3D map of the universe has been created. Now there are some factual information. For example, this Desi dark energy spectroscopic instrument project, this is basically a project of around 900 research institutions, and from India we have only one institution participating, that is Tata Institute of Fundamental Research. Remember this fact. Now based on the discussion, let's solve this MCQ. That is, the first statement says that dark energy consists of more than 90%. This is 72%. Then dark energy has been hypothesized as a repulsive force, which is a true statement. The third statement says that dark energy spectroscopic instrument has unveiled the most precise 3D map of the universe, which is also a correct statement. That is, only two statement is correct because the first statement is wrong. That is, B is the correct answer. Remember, not C. Now let's see the next topic. The next topic is regarding the launch of Akashteer System, about which the news appears on the page 9 of the Indian Express and becomes important from the perspective of GS paper 3, that is internal security. Now let's see what is basically Akashteer project. Now Akashteer project, basically it is a air defense like a protection project, whereby basically air defense mechanism has been developed by whom? The Bharat Electronics Limited, which is a PSU. Remember this, who has created it, and what it is basically, that it is an automated control and reporting system. That is, the air defense mechanism in India will get automated of the Indian Army. How? By digitalizing the entire process. That is, as soon as you see, for example, enemy drone, you generate information that is communicated to some system, and based on that communication the response is generated on that this ground based vehicle mounted this air defense system that we have, that is totally in a digitalized and like integrated manner, so that the entire process becomes more efficient. And what it will do is that it will function in the low altitude, remember, not in the high altitude or mid altitude, but in the low altitude. And this becomes important, this project. Why? Because in 2024 the Indian Army has categorized this year as the year of tech absorption. So which is the year of tech absorption by in the Indian Army? That is 2024. So this become crucial under that year. Now let's solve the MCQ. Now consider the following statements regarding the Akashteer system. It has been jointly developed by ISRO and DRDO. This is a wrong statement. It has been developed by Bharat Electronics Limited. Then it is an initiative designed to automate the air defense control and reporting process by digitalizing. This is a correct statement. Thirdly, it says that the Akashteer will enable the army to monitor high altitude. Now this statement becomes wrong. So only one statement is correct. Now let's go to the last topic of the day, and that is regarding the allotment of symbols to the political parties, regarding which the news appears on the page 12 of the Hindu and becomes important from the perspective of GS paper 2, that is elections in India. So allotment of symbols, if you see, it is taking place under election symbols order (1968), under which you have two categories of symbols, that is free and reserved. Just a minute. That is free and reserved. Now this reserved symbol is allotted to either a national party or a state party, and this free symbol is reserved, or basically it is allotted, I can say a better term, to the registered but unrecognized political parties. So in this regard, this news says that there have been certain issues regarding the allotment of symbols to some regional parties in Tamil Nadu. So for example, we'll understand this through an MCQ. With reference to the allotment of election symbols in India, consider the following statements. That is, a symbol reserved for a state party in any state shall not be included in the list of free symbol for any other state or union territory. This is a correct statement. That is, if you have allotted a symbol to a state party in one state, you cannot have that symbol for another state party in another state. The second statement says that for the registered but unrecognized political parties, one of the free symbols is allotted as a common symbol during an election, and if that party contests where either in 2 Lok Sabha constituency or in the 5% of seats to the state assembly. So this is also correct statement. So both are correct statement, only 2. Sorry, the framing of the option is not right. So consider that both the statements are correct. So this is all for today. Till then, take care.